Hey everyone, are we all waiting for more folks? Hey Max, I don't think I can hear you. I'm not sure about others. It might be me.
Yeah, I can't hear Max here. I can hear you, Alex.
Better?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Oh, cool. Thank you. How's everyone doing? Cool,
Okay.
cool. I got the impression Rita was going to show up to this meeting. She has all of the agenda items. I don't know if we're also waiting on Sirtesh or not.
I'm not sure. Let me see if they're joining. Yeah, I think Sartash is joining in a minute.
Cool.
Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Doing okay? How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Enjoying Wednesday.
What year is this?
What's that?
What year is this?
2010.
I'm in the office today. You might hear Lucky in the background.
Oh, cool. I haven't seen him in a while.
Yeah, he's here. I haven't either. Yeah, I was here last week, and then I think I was doing it on my computer here. The last time I was here before last week was in June. So it's been a while for me.
Wow. Yeah, it's actually like easier to take Zoom meetings from home.
Who would have thought?
Yeah. Do you have, because like if you have multiple people in the same room, it's awkward, right? Because there's no like, what you call it, like conferencing system. Uh, yeah, doing it from a bullpen desk just doesn't seem right. So, this is about as close as it comes to ideal Zoom situation for me.
And you have feline coworkers.
Yes, yes.
Is it a plush cat, Max, in the background?
Was this?
Is it a plush cat? The
Oh yeah, yeah,
Boy?
with boxing gloves.
yeah, it's very cute.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hello. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Welcome back from your travels.
Mm-hmm.
All the way from Detroit.
Indeed. Detroit. Do we have everybody?
I think so. I'm not expecting anyone more. We're about 11 minutes in, so.
Okay. All right. Let's get started, I guess. We can talk about KubeCon later or first, just depends on how people want to prioritize the topics. But that was one of the things that was brought up, right? Like what were some feedback that we got at KubeCon? I don't know.
Yeah.
If you want to
Oh,
do
sorry.
that first. Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
I mean, if this involves the salt cap, maybe save it to the end so that it's
Okay.
not time capped.
Okay. Like you can read my mind. All right. Okay. One thing also, I'm sorry, I am the only one that adds stuff to the agenda. The first link is about mutation feedback, and I think it was also something that Max, you had mentioned it would be good to address. So if y'all can click on the link. Mhm.
So this is this comment we're looking at, particularly this last one by Ta Hiraza?
Right. Like how to mutate the image, basically.
Yeah. I think we need purpose-built stuff for definitely Docker images. I don't know if there's like other structured data. I've seen like annotations, for instance, are often JSONified. This actually, but not annotations because we don't edit metadata, but config maps. That's what it was. Someone was saying, "Hey, I would like the ability to traverse and edit a config map because beyond the data field, it's an opaque string." That could also be another thing. I would be a little bit more careful about that one, to be honest, because JSON's a much more complicated data schema than a image spec.
I mean, that one is tricky, right? Because it could be anything.
Right. And so you get like this kind of like double traversal kind of thing. Like basically you'd need a mutation syntax within the mutation syntax. Yeah, I mean, or you'd lose out on some expressivity. Yeah, it's less clear to me, and I haven't thought much about it. But the image modification ones, like you could just have like 3 fields, right? The repo field, the image name, and the tag. Maybe there's others. Maybe I'm missing something in the spec, but basically you just need to like unpack those, let users set each of them specifically or all of them, and then reassign them.
Are you thinking of a new mutator or?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I think we
And-
talked about this before.
Oh, 100%. Like, this is always sort of like on the roadmap, but not something we've ever actually
I think
put.
we anticipated this, but it's good that now people are asking. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember this discussion when we were doing external data.
right.
Yeah, and for now, for the external data stuff, you're like, well, we're calling the webhook anyway, so the webhook can just do all of that for you. Not saying that's a good final solution, but just that for your guys' purpose that you were looking at of changing an image tag to a hash.
I mean, this definitely can be done with external data too. It's just
Oh,
those
yeah.
extra steps. Yeah.
Well, ideally, if we can avoid calling external data just for like latency purposes.
Right. I mean, this is a static thing, so it doesn't
Yeah.
actually need it, but yeah, can be done today.
Yes.
Well, but you mean the tag part, right?
Oh, not so the tag part that requires external data, right? To figure out how to translate a tag to a hash, you need some table.
I guess, sorry, I want to clarify on what Surtouch means you could do this today. Which
No, I mean,
part can you?
replacing the entire thing. So say changing docker.io to, I don't know, mycompany.io.
You can replace the entire string, but you can't replace subsets of strings.
Right. I mean, it'll be on
yeah.
the external data provider to figure that out, right? You send it, whatever it is they want to change. So you can write custom logic to replace whichever part you want.
Actually, we might want to discourage that particular use of external data, just from an idempotence perspective. Like, I think it's still fine in this case, but I think the classic example here would be well, in my original design doc, something like for fork, right? If you replace fork, or sorry, I'm forgetting. There's some like string substitution for fork. Yeah, if you replace fork with K, that's what it is. You think you're going to wind up with just single fork, but you wind up with K at the end because of the double replacement, right? So string operations are kind of usually not idempotent. And so that is a danger in saying, hey, just use external data for like anything we don't offer. Is that it is sort of a backdoor into like getting arbitrary mutations in there, which, I don't think that's something we want to prevent other than like asking people, hey, can you declare that you're idempotent? But just be aware there's a usability concern there where users might walk into that trap. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, but if you want to do like a purpose-built thing, then it would avoid that.
Yeah. So, and to be clear, like external data, if you were to do the same thing that we would do for the purpose-built thing with external data, that would be fine. It's just that external data is a wide open field, right? So you could do other things that wouldn't be fine. But yeah, if you like unpack, it's essentially unpacking a struct and repacking it. So you're assigning values rather than doing string replacements at that point.
Well,
So,
let's come back to the basic use case without external data. I think that's what the user was asking for, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think the question is, do we want to have purpose-built things?
You mean like a
Purpose-built.
mutator?
Yeah, like purpose-built mutated for images, purpose-built for some other thing. I mean, do we want to focus on like more generic scenarios, or do we want like these specific tasks?
So I think, we definitely want to draw a line somewhere, right? In terms of what it makes sense to build and maintain for. I think images is a fairly easy case just because they're so prominent in Kubernetes use case. The JSON one I am more skeptical of. I don't know what other use cases might be out there for purpose-built stuff. Like JSON honestly sounds a little bit generic, except for it's not used in very many places, right? So you have annotations, you've got maybe well, you've got annotations, config maps, and you've got maybe like other embedded resources where modifying a JSON formatted string field would be useful.
I mean, just off of the specific thing that this user asked, it's very static. There's not really anything that, I mean, yes, you could use external data feature, but you don't need it. It's a,
Right.
So we should provide something here, I think.
No, I think my question was like, how many of these things do we provide, right? Do we want this for images? Do we want for config maps? Do we want for, I don't know, pool policies? Like it just goes on and on, right? So where do we draw the line on like, okay, this is it?
I think it depends on how common it is and what's the, like how static it is, right? Like if it's really complicated, then that's where external data can help.
Yeah, and maybe how difficult it is
to write it, you mean?
Yeah. Because I definitely don't want to commit ourselves to having a bunch of custom mutators for sure.
And I think we specifically talked about the scenario, right? We said, say, I don't know, who wants to replace docker.io with my company registry.io? What images is this going to apply to? What happens if those are not there?
Yeah, like I think the scenario is actually in the original design doc.
Yeah, we talked about this and we said we don't want that because that's kind of a niche use case.
Oh, did we? I thought we just said it wasn't part of the alpha.
I think we said like, say if you want to mutate all the image registries, like how do we ensure like the customer would have those ones in their registry, right?
Customer would have which ones?
So say like we change docker.io to myenterprise.io, right? How do we ensure that, I don't know, Grafana is already there? How do we ensure
no, we wouldn't want to do that. Yeah.
Yes, this is what the customer is asking, right? Change docker.io to my company's registry.io.
Well, I think we want to like be able to let them change the string, but I don't think we're putting it on ourselves to make sure.
But that's like a kind of a use case that, like, what happens if those images are not there? Then it's just gonna crash with image pullback off, right?
But that's true of any mutation, right? You could say like, oh, I want a mutation to add a sidecar. Right? And what happens if you add the sidecar and it doesn't, like to your point, the image doesn't exist? What happens, right? Same thing. That's outside of the scope of this. The mutation, all it does is it mutates. That's its job. What's the result from that mutation? That's outside of this project.
Right. I think we talked about this as like a kind of like a niche use case. Like, are there folks out there that want to do that? So I think we might have punted because of just that, basically.
Yeah,
I can't remember any like group conclusion, but I can say I always kind of privately thought it was we were eventually gonna hit this.
No, yeah, I think this is definitely a thing, but I don't know if a lot of folks will need that. Like they will basically have to have all these image histories in their
Oh.
registry.
Sorry, here's I did find I was searching through the doc here. So here's the oh come on. So this is the section of the text of the section of the doc that talks
Yeah,
about
I
it.
remember modify image. Yeah, that was a thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's what we're talking about here.
Modify image.
Ironically, the modify set is not in this design doc and had been written.
That came later.
Yes.
Yeah, I think I might have even built this modify image thing. It's been a long time, but
So what happened to it?
I think we said we didn't want it.
I think it was not idempotent as written or something like that. I can't remember.
I
Yeah,
don't
I
remember.
do remember that now. Yeah, I think it was doing like string replacement. And then maybe it just like got scrapped before that was sorted out.
But like modify image is in this doc.
Yeah, are we actually disagreeing here? I'm not convinced we are. Or are we just like
I think Sertaj is saying we were against it at some point, and Max and I don't seem to remember.
Yeah, I remember us discussing it. I just was saying I don't remember why we said no to it. I think it might be because of the idempotency. So that could be the reason we said no to it, because we definitely talked about this. And I think it was also like the niche use case.
I mean, so it can be made to be idempotent, the idea of modify
Right.
image.
Maybe at the time we didn't do that or thought about that. And maybe because we were going to come up with the external data that we didn't do that.
Oh, that could be. So maybe you were like, it's not enough. It's not worth this work right now.
Right, because then nobody was asking us for that specific thing. I think we were trying to do this for replacing the tag to digest at the time, maybe.
Oh yeah, and that probably would have been a poor fit just because that would have been a hard set of mutators to maintain.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing, by the way. I'm fine with it. I just want to say, like we want to kind of keep the sort of things on the specialized mutators instead of like everything.
Yeah, and image, I think, is, as I said, I'm pretty comfortable with that being on the safe side. But if we want to figure out a principled line in the sand, we can. For others, oh man, sorry, my head's all over the place. Modify image. Oh yeah. I was thinking it may be necessary at some point with something like modify image to also get the ability to filter the glob, right? So if you're traversing a keyed list of containers, right, and you want to ignore my favorite injected sidecar or something like that, that's a theory that this will raise the salience of that, but
yeah, I can definitely see those cases too, right? Like somebody wants to change the container but not the init container or the ephemeral container, or just the ephemeral container but not the other containers.
Oh, that we could do already. That's fine. It's just the way we do the path iteration right now. Either you name every container individually, or you use star. And
I see, yeah. Yeah, that's the glob part is also kind of interesting, because then we'll need to have, say there's 3 pods of there, 2 you want to mutate, the third one you don't want to mutate, then you need to have basically 2 mutators to change those, but not touch the third one. Yeah.
Well, and it's might not be writable for certain cases, right? Like I want to mutate everything but this pod. That you wouldn't be able to express because you don't know, or sorry, everything but this container, because you don't know the full set of containers, right?
Right.
So without a glob type artifact with an exclude syntax, you can't express that. But it's not necessary for this person's use case. So clearly it's not always necessary, at least.
But I think if we do something like this, we're definitely going to get those cases.
Yeah. I'm kind of okay with that. But
so they will have to have multiple mutators per name?
Multiple mutators
Or
per
also,
name.
how are they going to know the names of the things? They'll need to know the names of the containers too.
Well, okay, so, well, no, what I'm saying is we would need a glob syntax, and which we have, right? And we would need to add to that some sort of matching expression
Oh, I see. Okay.
against the things that the glob is globbing over.
Are
glob.
we globbing on the names or the images?
Could be anything, right?
Yeah, this is a generic thing. This is the key field for like port.
Like you could say Grafana / star. So anything that's from the Grafana repo.
Oh, so no,
Whatever it's called.
probably not that. Okay, so for the location spec, right? Remember how we have the name : glob, right? So for that part, we can only test against the key fields, right?
Yeah.
That's that.
And I think that's the name, right? The key field
Yeah.
is the name there. Yeah. So we'll need to you'll need to know all the container names. So we'll need to know that Grafana is called Grafana in the container, and then mutate based on that.
Well, you wouldn't need to know that necessarily. Like if what you're doing is excluding, right? And you're saying mutate all images but the Grafana containers image. Okay, you need to know only Grafana, but you probably already know that because it's an exception, right? Versus you need to know the names of all containers everywhere.
But we don't have that today.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other bit, Rito, what you're talking about with the testing images, that's an interesting one around could you have value tests in the mutator itself, right? Of only mutate if the repo is this or the image value is that. Like maybe actually. That's a good question. Because it's not like a cross field validation at that point. But yeah, I would need to look at. There was some way you could get cycles with value tests, regardless of if it was cross field value tests, I thought. So I'd need to look through some of those anti-patterns again.
All right, we're like halfway through the meeting. I feel like there's more design considerations. Is there like a proposal at this point, or are we just kind of still just thinking about the scenarios?
What I'm hearing is there's consensus that this is something we're interested in looking into and we should design a thing. Is that fair?
Yeah, we can create an issue and then work on a proposal.
Okay, So create an issue and someone will follow up with a proposal, maybe? Who's that someone?
I can take a look at it or find someone to take a look at it.
Okay,
And they'll let me look at this value test
okay,
question too, because I think that is interesting.
okay. A proposal, cool. All right, moving on. The next one is the events PR. So the TLDR there is today the events are all created in the gatekeeper's systems and namespace, right? And the thought is, should we instead populate them in the violating namespace?
I think that if I remember right, when this was originally written, events were going to be read as a source of truth, kind of like they were going to be a reporting vector. But if you're no longer relying on them to have any kind of like, I don't know what the right word is, like trustworthiness in terms of, everything is represented here. It matters a lot less. The only thing I could think of would be data leakage, or the potential for data leakage. But
You
if
mean like privacy concerns, you mean?
yeah, well, yeah, like, or not even privacy concerns necessarily, but basically privilege upscaling, right? Like the canonical example, cache a secret, dump the contents of a secret in a violation, and then you can turn the ability to write policy and gatekeeper into the ability to read secret contents, right? Sort of blurring the boundaries of RBAC.
Right, but in this case, this is in the namespace of the violating thing, right? So
Right.
in theory, they should have the access to that namespace already.
Yeah. So I'm not saying I find it a persuasive concern, but it's not clear to me sort of what the expectations are there, right? Like, because the constraints and templates and all that are cluster scoped objects maintained by the cluster administrator. Presumably, well, I don't know how sensitive events are considered, generally speaking, right? Like if everyone in the namespace has permission to read events, but only some people in the namespace have permissions to read secrets, you could imagine like a poorly written constraint template leaking a secret. On the other hand, one, don't do that. And two, this is no one on that namespace would have permissions to like force that to happen, right? Because presumably they're not cluster administrators. So I don't think it's an issue, but it does get a little fuzzy. You like give me something definite. It's how I'm interpreting that phase.
Will this help with the clobbering? Because I
Clobbering?
think, yeah, the things.
Not really.
Not
Not
really? Because I thought the
Because
one of.
because clobbering is just like, I mean, if you have like a lot of, say, the same type of resources in the same namespace, it's still gonna clobber. So I don't think
Clobbering or throttling?
clobbering over
Like overwriting each other, getting the
Yeah.
Kubernetes aggregates them. Because I thought the reason was because they're in the same namespace.
Oh, well, there's also throttling as well, right? So even if you could avoid this aggregation behavior, if you try to write too many events at once, they'll just load shed you.
Yeah, that's another concern. will that still be the case if we write to different namespaces?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think so.
it might.
Go ahead.
I mean, it might be lessened, right? Because like all pod attached events will be partitioned per namespace, for instance.
I think the namespace is already a part of the key. So
Okay, and then
yeah, but
Right.
the thing that I was trying to remember why we were writing to the gatekeeper namespace, and one of the reasons is, again, we wanted to be sort of similar to how the violations are written to the constraints today, right? And constraints are global resources, and so therefore, you know, a regular user wouldn't be able to see that, right? It's the policy admins who can see it, or I guess cluster admins.
I mean, it's like transparently more secure not to write them to a namespace. I don't know if it's like actually less secure to write them to the namespaces, but there's that whole series of questions that you don't even need to ask yourself
Right.
if you're writing it to a gatekeeper system. And I think the other thing in the original design was this was intended as a quick way of exfiltrating like webhook data, right? Like, oh, here are the rejections we've gotten from the webhook. Here are the audit events, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And sort of in the alpha stage, it was like, well, is the throttling and all that a suitability concern for that particular use? And I'm guessing why it never went past alpha is yes, there was a suitability concern with that. So
But I'm kind of going back and forth on this, because on the one hand, I see the security concerns very loud and clear there, but then on the other hand, I see this user's point in that, you know, as a operator and I'm deploying something, it's super helpful to see the events and actually know why they failed. You know, like what kind of violations deploying something actually resulted in.
although it's a little weird that they weren't able to see the webhook rejections. Unless we're talking about pods, deployments to pods, and that's why.
Yeah, that might be why.
I mean, why not both?
Or dry run mode, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm guessing this is like audit on the dry run side, right?
Well,
Can
then their deployment would have worked, and so, but they wouldn't have had visibility into like audit rejections.
Mhm.
Right. I think that's the
Possibly.
concern. Yeah.
So
I
it
mean,
would
can
be
we?
warning or dry run, basically.
Yeah, I think the only real like meaningful change it makes is again like if you had permissions to create pods in this namespace, you could see the webhook rejections, and that's it, right? But you could see those. If you didn't have permissions to create secrets, right, and someone has a secret rejection, you'd have no way of knowing that, right? And you'd have no way of seeing the contents of how secrets were validated, blah, blah, blah. But now potentially you could with events.
I mean, can we do
Again,
both? Can add
Was
a
it?
flag? Can we do both? Add a flag. They can either emit to gatekeeper system or to namespaces. That seems like best of both worlds, right? If you have like a specific use cases, then you can do either of them.
Oh,
And
the
it's still
flag.
alpha, so yeah.
I mean, if it's easy, I don't have a problem with that. Like the only like let's make everything configurable like end game problem would be if everything's so configurable that then it's the code is just full of forking logic.
I mean, in
I
this
don't
case,
think
it is
we're
just
in
like
that-
it's single line change, like it's
Yeah.
resource namespace to gatekeeper namespace.
I think I'm okay with that. Then it's ultimately the operator's decision.
And this is turned off by default.
Yeah,
and
it's,
alpha,
it's off by default, right?
right. And then we
Okay.
can default to the old behavior, I don't know, just to
Yeah.
make everybody feel good. So
Okay,
we don't break anybody, but this won't be an immediate change.
I'm okay with that.
And then I think if you think that this will be more valuable, then we can make this default, and when we go to beta or stable or whatever.
I think the reason why it can't, or it hasn't graduated, one of them is because of the clobbering, so the data isn't as accurate as
Useful
we
and
would like it to be. Yeah,
complete. There we are.
complete, yes, yes.
I mean, in a sense, that's also not complete in constraints,
Correct.
because we cap it. If you want the real thing, then you need to parse the logs.
Yeah, it's similar for sure.
I do wonder if we had something like a messaging queue. Right. Like if you could
Mm.
publish these things to one
People
of those.
have asked for this, yes.
Yeah, I think we talked about Dapper before.
Do we want to look into that? I
Well,
think
I
it'll
mean,
make a
that-
lot of people happy.
Yeah, I mean, that's a separate conversation, but yeah, definitely.
All right.
I think yes. Certainly when we have the cycles.
Open another issue.
I would put it higher than events for myself personally, but
Higher than events? What do you mean?
in terms of I would see more use out of it than events. Just because I think you could get complete data sets from it.
Okay.
But that's my own two eyes. I don't know what other people are doing.
Let's start the issue first, and then maybe we already have one, but anyway, I'll follow up. I'll follow up with this PR, but also the issue. I think we have a pub sub issue already, but anyway.
So ironically, I'm just looking at the last item in the agenda, formerly the first one, that we deferred to not time cap.
Yeah. Shall we go to the next one then? Are we done with this one?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. All right. Xander, would you like to share feedback that you heard?
Yeah, I can just mention what I heard at the OPA project booth. So I was just there for part of one of the days, and I think one of the themes that has been, extremely consistent. People don't like writing Rego, but I think we're seeing some alleviation of that with the policy library. So like the reason that I wanted to be at the OPA booth to begin with was to show policies on Artifact Hub and the new website. And people did seem excited about that. So that's cool. And then the other things were questions around when we expect to drop the like alpha label from external data. And then the last thing was somebody asked about resource creation, which I told Sertaj and Rita is like something that I'm totally not sold on. Like,
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
yeah,
Sorry, go.
and no, it was just like, and it seemed like the person only really brought it up because it was like, well, Caverno does this, so Gatekeeper should too. But I asked them for like, okay, give me like an end-to-end like use case for this feature. Like, say we did this, what would you use it for? And they said something to the effect of like, if I create a namespace, I want these resources spun up in that namespace, like resource quota objects or what have you. And it's the kind of thing that today would be done with a controller, that with like a watch on a namespace. And like, I don't think that moving that functionality into Gatekeeper solves any problem space that's not addressed by other solutions today. And like, I could maybe see an argument for wanting to shift some of that behavior more towards admission time rather than like a controller watching resources. But to me, it's not a compelling story to like invest a bunch of time into building this feature out.
And by the way, if it's still accurate, I believe the Caverno feature just creates. It doesn't like watch and ensure existence like a full controller.
Right.
would.
I don't think there's like actually any kind of like reconciliation loop associated with that, like the Kubernetes API server is doing. Like, yeah, or the controller manager. Like, yeah.
Yeah, it's a hairy enough space, and having that kind of privileges in those kinds of things in a product that has like security level privileges, I would think that there's, if it's a worthwhile feature, like I would want to see something purpose built to do that. Just because things like conflicts and controller fights and customization, all this stuff is a very, very deep rabbit hole.
Yeah, those were the bits that I gathered from KubeCon. I think Rita probably had other discussions, but yeah.
Let's see. Sorry, I'm just trying to multitask. We got some good questions at the at the end of the talk. I think people were asking about like how to write a external data provider. What are some common scenarios for that? So I think there's general interest there. And I think somebody even asked about like if there are examples of how to write one, right? So I mentioned the reference implementation as well as examples. So that was good. I'm trying to remember. Oh, and then there was a question about what the cell cap, what does that mean for Gatekeeper? And I also mentioned that the cell cap folks and the Gatekeeper maintainers are going to work together to figure out how to coexist and provide a good user experience. And so I had a talk with Joe Betts, and he actually, I was trying to explain like how Gatekeeper works with the constraint framework, right? And one of the things that we kind of thought was, what if the constraint template could be the parent that people create, and then within the constraint template, it would either have Rego or cell. And if it's cell, then the constraint template could create a child resource for the emission policy that the cell controller understands, the cell emission controller understands. And then if it's Rego, then Gatekeeper will handle it. If it's not Rego, then Gatekeeper will just basically ignore it, right? So that's sort of very, very early stage, high level design. But I think that may provide the consistency users are looking for. How does that, what does that mean for audit? I'm not sure. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, sorry. So many thoughts on that. I don't want to interrupt the flow though. If you had more on the.
Yeah, let me just finish like that, and then in relations to that is, we had like a SIG meet and greet thing on Friday, and Jim from Kyverno was there as well. So we actually got kind of, I sat down with him, kind of talk about, what is the policy working group working on, what is the goal of the working group, and what's the current status. So that is something that I think we will see from that working group. One of the things that he brought up was, as y'all know, there is this CRD called policy report. And I think he wanted to see, if and when Gatekeeper can also create the policy reports for the violating resources. So that's one that I think we should probably follow up on. And I did ask him, like, the original design basically talks about how all the violating resources would create a bunch of custom resources on the cluster. Is that still the case? And he said yes. And I said, okay, what about the performance implications? So that, I think that is still there. So I think let's review that again and give him the feedback, and then there's probably going to be some back and forth on that. But sounds like other policy related projects are using that as well. I think the Falco guys might be generating policy reports today. I'm not sure.
I think
so
it didn't fix the CD problem. That's
No.
why we
No.
didn't. Yeah.
I know, and that was the first thing I asked. Yeah.
Which is feedback we left on the original design.
I know.
Okay.
So like, why move to something else that has the same exact problem? Yeah.
No
worries, just yeah. That
Yeah.
we are not engaging.
Right, we're not engaging, and I guess my point is, like, if we don't want to or don't or have a valid concern, it might be good to once again go to that working group and just hash this out once and for all, right? And if it's something that, again, we're not the only people that have concerns here, right? Like, anybody who's running these solutions in their clusters would hit the same performance issues. So that's one. And then the second thing is, again, with the South thing looming ahead, I was asking, how is Kyverno going to be impacted by all this? So I think it might be good for folks who's working on different policy solutions to think about what the user experience should be. And again, I think that should be one of the things that the working group should focus on. So at some point, I think we should probably attend that working group, just, to see how things go there. But yeah, that's the gist of it.
Cool. Yes. The cell stuff that I was like on the edge of my seat for. So the audit, I think the right answer would be to bundle cell the same logic that the cell cap is using to evaluate things into the constraint framework. Then audit can run the policies itself. This has a secondary benefit where the cell cap is going to be, rolled out over time, and Gatekeeper can then become a shim, right? If people want to play around with those resources, and they know they're going to have like a blended thing in the future or whatever, we can make that fairly seamless, which is, I think, a cool position to be in. If we bundle it into the framework. What was the other issue. So there, well, that was audit, and how would they coexist? Was that the other one, or?
Well, so constraint template would be the parent that creates
Right.
the mission policies. And I guess like if you just create the mission policies, how would the framework know, right? Like, you know,
Right.
yeah.
So they would have to start out as constraint templates, probably. Like it could, like, so this is also interesting for something like shift left, right? Like if we ran Gator test, it's possible if we wanted to, we could set things up to observe these resources, right? Like look for the binding, the policy definition, and all those other resources, and feed them in. I don't know if it, the intent of how those things were designed were to be building blocks so that people could build other things on top of them, right? So to the extent that constraint templates might have extra metadata, right, for coordination, let's say we start doing something that allows gradual policy rollout, right? That would actually be built on top of bindings. And so we wouldn't be able to do that just using bindings as a source of truth, right? Like if you wanted to fade, say, a constraint template from one set of parameters to the next, kind of like how a deployment gradually rolls out pods. So that would be my concern with going that route. I don't think if we start out just assuming everything starts out as a constraint and template, I don't think we're cutting ourselves off from ingesting the raw resources in the future, or frankly, vice versa.
I forgot to mention another thing that Joe wanted to understand also is look at, he wants to kind of look at all the use cases that gatekeeper policies are being used today and figure out what are the policies that just cannot, that cell cannot address.
Right. And right now, external data is one. It's not that cell couldn't do it. Like you could add an external data function, let's say, but I don't think they would want to do that for arbitrary external data in an embedded process. I know at least that was some of the debate in writing the CAP. So maybe that changes in the future.
Can we start a doc to list out all the scenarios that cannot be done with cell? Other than external data, what about referential policies?
Oh, sorry, external data and referential constraints.
Those are not, right?
Yeah, either of those. I think those are the only two, to be honest. Like maybe there's a language edge case we're not thinking of. Like I do think if you look at something like the container limits or resource ratios stuff where we wrote code that is able to canonicalize, like if it's written in gigabytes, megabytes, or whatever, into a standard value. You would probably not be able to do that in cell. You would need to write a function to do that in cell, kind of like how we needed to write an embedded rego function for external data.
Okay. So just those three?
That I'm aware of, right? So yeah, really.
I mean, I guess mutation is later, right? Mutation, cell is working on mutation eventually.
Okay. Well, the cap like is thinking about, hey, mutation is maybe a use case to consider. For the same reason, I wouldn't want to use rego in mutators. I
Mhm.
wouldn't want to use cell in mutators. So I want to make that case.
Okay.
Like
So then
maybe there's
mutation is another one.
mutation is another
Another,
thing that cell can't handle. I would argue yes, but that argument hasn't happened, so I don't know how persuasively I would, come out of that argument.
okay.
Or if there's like things they could do because they're in the API server that we can't. But the reinvocation stuff, that's because you know what I'm talking about with the reinvocation stuff. How the webhooks can get called twice because sometimes you add a sidecar, but you are also like adding parameters. Depending on there's no like state order.
Got it.
That's there's no way around that, and so convergence.
Okay.
If you need
So
convergence-
4, right? Referential constraints, external data, the number conversion thing, and mutation.
Right. Which is not to say I don't think mutation couldn't have an embedded thing in the API server. Right. That's just, I don't think cell should be that thing.
Okay. It's good to know when you use what, and this is the start of that, I guess.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I think Joe said that at some point he's gonna try to attend this meeting and start thinking about the integration.
Yeah. Do we want to try to start experimenting with that work when we get the cycles? Like, is that things people would be happy to
You
see?
mean adding cell to the framework?
Yeah.
This is Will's PRs, right? We already have.
Yeah, but like fully realized.
Right. Yeah.
Rather than the experiment. Yeah. Cool.
All right, we're over.
That's an action-packed meeting today, though.
I know, and we didn't even finish, so there's more to be discussed.
Wait, is there more to be?
No,
what's
I
not-
meant like I meant like there's a couple of things that's TBD. So
Gotcha.
cool. All right, it was great seeing y'all. Have a good one.
Good to
Bye,
see
y'all.
you.
Yeah. See ya.
Bye.